Appreciate you stopping by again this week. We'll see you next time. So I'm gonna hold down, I'm gonna touch my screen on the main part of this, and then I can slide up and down to control the exposure. I don't wanna blow out the highlights too much. I apologize for the abrupt rewind, but it dawned on me after I published last week's episode, and then I heard from a few people that kind of felt like maybe I skipped a couple steps there and just kind of flew through that whole bit on exposure and how you were touching the screen and sliding your finger around, and some of that didn't make sense. This most often comes into play when folks are photographing, say, a sunset or a sunrise, or there is a window involved in the photo where maybe there's a bright light shining in through the window and they're not sure, should I expose what's outside the window or should I expose what's inside the room? And you really are kind of stuck going back and forth. So when you physically touch the screen, the camera is going to try to focus and set exposure for the pixels that you happen to select. While your finger is still on the screen, you can slide that finger up and down on the screen to adjust the exposure. In this case, the sample that I'm going to show you here, I just set up to take a real simple photo out the office window. And as you can see, I touch the screen, slide my finger up and down, and it adjusts the exposure. In this case, I'm going to leave what is outside the window exposed correctly. That ultimately is going to make everything on the inside very, very dark. On this photo, I will slide it and adjust the exposure to the items inside the window, but as you can see, it blows out the highlights in a severe way. So my suggestion is this. This dawned on me, I was sitting at the Toby Mac concert and I'm watching people all over the place holding up their phones, taking pictures of the concert, taking video of what is obviously a very dark arena with some very bright lights happening at most of the time on the stage. We probably should point out that the way to do this is to expose correctly the brightest brights. In your software, in this case, even on your phone, you can usually lighten up the shadows in the dark areas enough to see what's going on. However, if you overexpose or blow out your highlights and then try to compensate later, there is not enough visual information there for your camera, your phone, whatever it is that you're using to be able to bring back the details from what were in those highlights. If I were to try to get these highlights back by simply sliding my highlight slider down, you can see that there's not a lot of information that comes back by pulling those highlights down. And if I turn my exposure down, I'm really going to be messing with the quality of this photo. So having those highlights blown out is a tricky one to be able to fix. At the same time, I can use the exact same photo. So here I've got the exact same photo bracketed on a tripod. This one is underexposed a little bit, shot at a 500th of a second. I actually exposed it correctly for what you see outside the window. The nice thing about this is all of these shadows and these dark areas are definitely fixable within my software of choice. In this case, Adobe Lightroom. I can slide my shadows up to pull some of that back. I'm going to pull a little bit on my whites. I'm going to adjust my exposure just a little bit to brighten up the room. Now you're watching the highlights outside the window kind of get blown out again. But in this case, there was information there already. And as I slide my highlights back down, you can see that I can bring that information back. The one negative, you're going to get some noise in the image, which is some graininess. In this case, in Adobe Lightroom, I can go into some of my noise reduction settings and I can definitely smooth some of that out. Speaking of blowing out highlights, I promised to stop harping on the snow and cold thing, but we did have one just awesome morning where I got to fly the drone and shoot some pretty cool B-roll footage. So check out some of these cool shots that I got of hopefully one of our last winter shoots of the season here around our house. Thanks again for stopping by. We'll see you next week on 3 Minutes on Thursday. you.